Using some gold metallic trim, I've just pinned this now to the bottom of the organza, and what I shall do next is overlock the organza so that it's all neatened off, and then turn that under, and then I shall sew it down onto the trim. Okay, the next step is to pull up the chiffon to create some swags, and being quite methodical about this, what we try to do is to have about 35 to 40 centimetres between each peak on the dress where the ribbons are going to go, and approximately 10-inch pull up on every single swag. So starting from the back, it's quite low, and then it goes up slightly into the next swag, up slightly into the next swag. You can just see that. Then for the front one, it goes down slightly to create a nice big swag at the front. So I think we're quite happy with where we've put the pins for this. So what we're going to do is make these permanently fixed, and we're planning on having separate ribbons attached, but haven't quite got to that stage yet. This is where we are at the moment.
Okay, next up I bought this lovely goldy coloured, I think it's like a silk crushed velvet. It has a lovely shine in places. Now the next debate was, because it has lines going across in one sort of direction, was which way to have the lines lying on the valance. So we experimented by holding it up that way, and then I experimented by holding it up that way. In the end, my choice was to have the lines actually going down from top to bottom on the valance across that way, and not that way. It just didn't seem to work. So I don't know if you can buy this online, because I actually found it at a shop in our city of Birmingham, which was a bit of a lucky find, but I'm pretty sure it's not stretchy like the polyester velvets you can get that are really cheap, that stretch in all kinds of directions, which we didn't really want. That's what I decided to go with. Now the first thing we'll have to do as well is you need to get the circumference of the whole of your skirt, and mine's about 6.5 meters, so we always add a bit. That's a general rule, so we're going for 7 meters, even though that's a bit wider than the circumference of the dress. And then we also need to find out how wide we want the valance to be, plus allowing more for a turnover at the bottom of the hem. So that's what we're going to do now. Earlier on I did a quick mock-up to get the width of the valance that I would need, and this one's 6 inches wide from top to bottom, but just to be on the safe side, when I cut it out of my actual fabric, we've decided to add an extra inch, so we're going to go for 7 inches wide from the top to the bottom. Okay, right, at the minute Mom's marking it all out. To start with though, you need to get the width of your fabric. The width of this was 52.5 inches, or 1 meter 32 centimeters, and I have to make each strip 7 inches wide. So, and plus you have to take into account the circumference of the dress, which we worked out earlier at 6.5 meters. So I've worked out I'll need to cut 5 strips at 18 centimeters or 7 inches wide. So we're just marking that along at the minute, so each one should be 18 and the next strip 18, and as I said it was 1 meter 32 wide going from that way to that way for the width. So that works out at, I should have 6 meters 60, which is 10 centimeters over the circumference of the dress. Okay, I now have my 5 strips of fabric cut at 18 centimeters wide. Now what I'm going to do is join one end onto the next end and so on till I've got one long strip. I've just laid out my strips that I've now sewn together to make the very long strip, like so. Okay, the next thing we've done is we've repeated the same process with some white interfacing. It doesn't matter if it's iron on or sewing because you can sew both in, which is what we're going to do. So again, you just cut out, except this time you cut 6-inch strips, which you wanted an inch less on the width from the top to the bottom. And you'll see why in a bit. Okay, I forgot to mention that when doing the interfacing you don't sew a seam like I did on the velvet. You have to just overlap one on top of the other and just sew down, like so. Okay, the next stage is to put the stiffener on the back of your strip of fabric, and what I've done here is I've just turned the bottom over. This is why you had to make your interfacing about an inch shorter than your outer strip of fabric, because you need to turn over the edge. So then you'll have a nice neat edge right along the bottom. And all I've done so far is just pinned it over in place, and I've done that for the entire strip. And next I'm going to be sewing along and sewing that down. Okay, I've just sewn across the bottom on my strip, and while I was there I sewed across the top as well, but I didn't turn the edge over like I did at the bottom. Just left it like that and just ran a line all the way across the top. We haven't sewn down the sides at the end yet because we haven't got our final length. We just made it a lot longer than what we thought we'd need. So that'll be sorted out at the end. So that's basically that bit. Rightio, next thing I'm doing to my trim is I've got some what it was called barley twist rope cord in a goldy colour, and I want to jazz up the bottom of my balance or trim, whatever you like to call it. I just basically want to sew it onto the bottom. So all I'm doing is basically just coming up through it by hand, and then just catching it on. Really, really easy, not too difficult. Just come up. I'm just starting this one off, so I just want to go backwards a little bit and then forwards. Okay, continue sewing on your cord right way to the end of your strip. Now mine was about 6.5 meters long, and it's taken me about 4 hours to do that. Quick tip at the beginning, put a bit of tape on your cord and leave a bit extra than what you need. Okay,
Okay, this is just showing the petticoat now that's been pleated and it's just tacked for the moment. Okay, I've pinned and tacked the petticoat now onto the inside of the waistband. And when we come round to the openings, I've left a little bit of a selvage there so that I can turn that over later and neaten it up. Okay, this is the inside at the top of the skirt. I had to do a little bit of an adjustment with the height on the skirt, so I've hiked everything up, which is at the same height as the waistband now. But what I shall do is, on the right side, put it onto the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew right into that crease there and sew all the layers together at the same time. Then when that's been done, I can then cut this down a little bit and overlock it so it's neat. And then while I'm at it, go to the side seam here. I've turned the material under to give it a neat finish, and I'm going to then just sew it onto the inside of the zip so it gives a neat finish and gets all those frayed edges out of the way. And I shall do the same for the other side as well. Turn that over to neaten it, and then I shall just slip stitch it all the way down next to the zip without going too close. Okay, I've sewn through all the layers now, and this is what it now looks on what it looks like on the inside. I've actually overlocked the rough edge, and for neatness I've turned the whole thing down and just catch stitched it down so it's nice and neat. And I've also sewn down the side here to neaten that up next to the zip. The next thing to do is to sew up the back seam. You can just about see there. There we go. That's all going to be sewn up now, and that will finish the petticoat. Okay, now we're ready to permanently attach the valance to the bottom of the underskirt, and the piping has already been sewn on. So sew onto the bottom of the skirt. Now I didn't want to have any extra bulk on this, so I didn't turn it over. I just used some pinking shears and neatened off the top. And then on the back, just turn it over. I was then able to neaten off the petticoat on the inside, and I've overlocked that. This material frays a lot, so if you choose this type of material and you haven't got an overlocker, I would advise that you give it a seam and then sew it down, otherwise it will keep fraying. Okay, this is the seam where the valance was finally put together, and we need to neaten off the piping. You can't just cut the piping because it will fray. So what you need to do is to cut up to the seam with one piece of piping and cut up to the seam with the other. Get rid of those. Then get a piece of sellotape. Place one half across and the other half to join it like that, and then firmly wrap the sellotape around it like that. That will stop both ends from fraying. So then I'm going to reattach this back onto the valance with a bit of sewing, and you'll hardly notice that join. Okay, we've tried quite a few methods of what actually works with this, and we've decided that we're going to attach the valance to the bottom of the panels where the piping is. So what I'm doing at the moment is just loosely letting the dress fall where it needs to, and then I'm just putting a pin at each section just to see what that looks like.
Now I've actually attached the swags to the valance. I'm going to decorate mine a bit similar to this, as you can see in the book here, except I'm going to make little rosette flowers just to make it look a little bit special.
To make the rosettes, what I've done is I've cut strips out approximately 30 centimetres long by 4 centimetres wide, and I shall need 26 of these because there are 26 panels. So you're going to start off by doing a small hand sewn seam going up the width of the strips. I'm not really going to be too careful about it as long as it's a small running stitch. And when I get to the top, I'm just going to go over that last stitch about 4 or 5 times, because I'm actually going to do some ruffling in a minute and I don't want the sewing to ruffle all the way down this side seam as well. So about 5 over stitches right at the end, just so that when you pull it, it doesn't pull down there as well. Right, keep your needle threaded and then just do a running stitch just below the top, and that goes all the way around. Right, I've now gone all the way around the top of my circle, and still keep your needle attached to the thread. You don't need to take that off at all. We're going to gently pull on the thread and ruffle the whole thing up, being very gentle with the way you pull, because you don't want to pull it too hard because you'll snap the thread. This hole now is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and as it gets really tight, I'm now going to grab it in my fingers to hold it there, and I'm going to take the needle and thread and go through the top, and as I pull the sewing thread through, I'm going to put a bit of tension on it, and I'm just going to sew from another direction, only about ½ centimetre down, pull the thread, do some more. I'm going to do this a few times so the rosette doesn't come undone and it's getting tighter and tighter and tighter. Going around the rosette, pulling it in. Right, when I've done that a few times, I now want to fasten off my thread, so what I'm going to do is just go over and over in the same place about 4 or 5 times. And then cut the thread, and then when you open it, you have a rosette, just like that. And we're going to use these rosettes to decorate the bottom of our valance.
Okay, this is a close-up of what it should look like. It's completely up to you if you want to decorate it, or even if you decide to have a valance. Some of you might not decide to have a valance at all, but there we go. You can decorate it any way you like if you wish to. All my little flower rosettes have now been sewn onto the trim, and I've also decided to give it a bit of decoration with some silky rat's tail cord, it's called, and this is 2mm thick. If you decide that you want to decorate it, that's what I've used on my particular pattern. Okay, so at the moment it's more or less looking like you see in the video here. my whole skirt now. The valance all on the bottom. And as we keep stressing how difficult this was to do, I recommend lots of paracetamol, by the way, folks. But there we go. I say it does have a mind of its own, this valance. It was really tricky to do. This is the best we've been able to do. The next thing I want to do is these ribbons that she has on her dress. Depending which version you look at, they all seem to be slightly different or made out of slightly different fabrics. Like this one was the show I saw in London, and this one I think is from another production somewhere. The ribbons look slightly different. So what I've decided to do is do very short bows at the front, and like this one, very long bows, but just long ones on the side. So be a short one, long one, and then a short one, and they gradually slant towards the back, and the same on here as well. So that's what I'm going to do next. Okay, I'm next going to make some little ribbons to go between the swags at the bottom of the skirt. Again, this is optional, you don't have to, but I thought I'd show what I was doing. I got some goldy yellow ribbon, which is about 3.5 centimetres wide. I then cut a strip that is about 20 centimetres long, so from there to there. I then fold the strip in half and sewn down the edge, and I've used some pinking shears to cut the edge so it doesn't fray too much. But I'm not too worried about it because I'm going to be gathering down the middle. So next you need to turn your bow inside out, like so. So now your seam is in the middle, so, and then should look like that. And then you're just going to gather down the middle of the bow, like so, with a gathering stitch, and then I will be sewing them onto the dress. And this is where I've sewn them. Just literally go between bottom of the piping on the swags, like so, and I'll be putting them between the rest of the skirt, in between. Okay, for making my bows on my skirt, I'm using this really nice bronzy gold lace, and I'm going to line it with the same gold silk satin. I need 6 bows altogether, and I've decided to make mine 1.50 metre long by 15 wide. My shorter bows will be 88 centimetres long by 15 wide again. Okay, just if you can imagine, this is my bow. I've got a piece of scrap here. Now what I did is I put the shiny side, the good side of the satin, face down on the table, and then your matte side, your bad side will be facing up. I then got my lace, I pinned it all the way round, like so. Again, imagine this is one really long rectangle in the measurements that I used, but you can make it as big or small as you want. I then sewed a line all the way down one edge, about 1 centimetre in, all the way down the other, all the way up one side, and left a gap here, because afterwards, after you've sewn from there all the way around and back to there, leaving that gap where you haven't sewn, you'll then need that for turning your bow inside out. I did this for the tails as well, but you can use any method you like that you prefer to if you want to make your own bows.
Using a small piece of gold trim that was used on the organza, we're just going to put a small ring of the trim around the bow to pull it in.
Okay, we've now attached our ribbons to the skirt, and they're just attached with a little popper so they come off, and then you can reattach that like so. There we go. I found the poppers might be best option for like when you're twirling round. Don't want your bows to be coming off. I wanted them detachable so that it would be easier just for storing, but you can sew yours on if you wish to. So I've got my two shorter ones at the front, all nicely lined, two long ones on the side. Then round to the back, two shorter ones.